You might not realize it, but belonging could be the missing piece to your success. Think about it. Whether it's in business, relationships, or life, feeling like you truly belong can change everything. And today's guest, Dan Berger, has spent his entire career building businesses that bring people together. Dan founded Social Tables, an event planning platform that helped execute over 1.5 million events per year before he sold it for $100 million. Now he's building Assemble Hospitality, a new concept designed to create the ultimate space for corporate retreats. But Dan's journey to understanding belonging started way before his success in business. As an immigrant adopted kid, he faced many challenges around his own feeling of belonging from a young age. And instead of letting them define him, he built a process to help others find belonging in their lives.
And I learned that belonging is a fundamental human need. I always say you need personal belonging before you need professional belonging. When people are engaged, they're committed because they see what they contribute is having an impact. And after they are committed, there's belonging.
Today, he's here to share that process with us. How can you create belonging in your business, your team, and your own life? Stay tuned because Dan is about to break it all down. Welcome to The Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My first question for you is, what would you say is the biggest thing either that you did or you are doing that has helped you to achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
I hate answering these kinds of questions because my wife gets mad that I don't include her in the answers. But the reality is that I had 41 years before I met her, so I can get away with it. I think the answer is quite simple, and probably most people think of it intuitively, and that's essentially getting time to do what you want to do. And that's only unlocked because of financial freedom. And for some people, it's a lifestyle business because they get paid to do what they love, and they get a salary and they enjoy it and keep doing it, for infinity. For me, I really enjoyed what I was doing, but once more employees got involved, investors got involved, I lost that a little bit. So I would say that selling my company allowed me not just to make money, but also to fall in love with an industry that I didn't realize was actually deep in my heart.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so you sold your company for $100 million. That's really an insane number. And I'm curious, back when you first started it, did you already have ideas of like, well, I really enjoy this, that's why I want to work on it? Or did you feel like, oh, this is just a good opportunity to make money and that's why you picked it?
Yeah, I would say the most influential book I've read prior, I guess it happened a little later after selling my business. But, it's funny, like I feel like a lot of people are only able to communicate their life trajectory after life has happened a little bit. So what I mean by that is reading Simon Sinek's Find Your Why helped me crystallize what my life has really been all about, which is bringing people together and essentially doing the community thing before it was called community. And that started in a tree house, growing up with friends. It moved to a little bicycle gang that I had with some friends. It moved to like online gaming and my gaming clan, and it was called before that name was changed to Team. So I've always kind of enjoyed bringing people together and doing cool stuff. And essentially that industry I fell into and realized I love is hospitality. And I think hospitality is in human nature. We all have some hospitality related value or skill. And I think that most creators should lean into that in order to build authentic communities. So to answer your question, I never knew I wanted to build something, even though I was building community. And only once I started my business as a side hustle did I realize, oh, I'm creating community here. And I created multiple layers of community. I created it for employees. I created it for customers. I created it for and our software was used to build community because it was event planning software. So it's pretty cool that all those things came together, even though I wasn't planning it.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that as you're saying that like I've realized myself along the way that whether intentional, subconscious or not, that there's certain things that I do that it makes sense because it's connected to something that I used to do when I was younger, or
Yeah.
like I had interest in or I was good at. And it's kind of just an extension of that in some ways that I'm doing now.
What's an
And
example of that, Brian? What comes to mind for you?
like there's examples in big and small ways. I guess like more like a fundamental sense. Like I love building things. Like I was obsessed with Legos as a little kid, and figuring out how things worked, and that translates really well into today of like building software. I just really enjoy creating that. And also I think things even like in business itself of like building the platform that I've built today, I think it only came up to be because of all the experience I had before. I started as like a web designer, graphic designer, started building websites, then web applications. And then I built some web applications where they kind of were platforms where it wasn't just me selling to the end consumer, but it was to a business, and the business would then have their own customers. And Heights platform works just like that as well. And so I think it's often that a lot of the experiences that you have leading up to whatever you're doing now allows you to create that thing that you do today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I totally agree. And software is cool like that because the time to value, if you will, the time to see what you're building is instantaneous.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wrote a book called The Quest, The Definitive Guide to Finding Belonging. Can you take us back to a moment in your life when you first realized that belonging wasn't something you could take for granted?
So I like to think about my life. And again, hindsight is a real kind of blessing. I like to think about my life as a series of belonging traumas. And everybody's got a trauma. I don't use that word lightly. Everybody's traumas is valid because it's your traumas or your maximum pain level. And, some people may experience some terrible things, some people not so much. But at the end of the day, you only know what you experienced. So my belonging traumas are really, there's three of them. The first one is adoption. I was adopted. I was given up for adoption when I was 2 days old. I was adopted when I was 5 days old. So from the moment I was conceived, if you will, my my biological mother was essentially communicating to me through hormones that I don't belong here in her womb and subsequently in her life because she made the decision to give me up quite early. In addition to that, that created heightened cortisol levels in her, and it just was passed to me. And I've been an anxious kid or an adult or whatever, medicated adult now. And the second belonging trauma is when my adoptive dad abandoned me, and my mom abandoned me essentially when I was 2 years old. And it wasn't just like a divorce; it was just like a cutting off because whatever. Like I don't really know why, but most likely he was just sick of waiting for a kid, and they waited 10 years to have me. And by the time the marriage was falling apart, so I was abandoned by my dad. And the third is immigration. I immigrated to this country when I was 9. I came here from Israel. I didn't speak a word of English. And I was kind of thrown into this new society, new culture. And I did what, academics call negotiating identities. And many people actually get this wrong. People who are not born here but come here in childhood are 1.5 generation immigrants, not first generation, because you get two identities essentially. So first generation immigrants are people born to immigrant parents. So I was a 1.5 generation immigrant, and I never felt like I belonged in this country until much later, wrestling between Israeli American, American Israeli, like who am I, what am I? So I was belonging less from the beginning. And I realized that belonging, I felt was a fundamental need that I have. And as I began to research the topic, I spent 3 years researching the topic. I deal with a lot of imposter syndrome, so I needed to really become an expert on the topic. I read over 100 academic papers, dozens of books, all kind of related and adjacent to the topic. And I learned that belonging is a fundamental human need. It's independent of any other need that we have, and it can be measured and acted on. So I wanted to give people the process that I created for myself in how to find belonging. And what the difference between my work and everybody else's, the last thing I'll say on this, is that I actually lay out a process that people can follow. And it's unique to every person because there are different paths you can choose on that process. And many of the adjacent works on the topic don't do that. They are very spiritual in the nature.
Yeah, yeah, I'm curious about this. I want to find out more kind of to help our creators and our audience understand, like, in terms of any communities they're thinking of building themselves, but also for themselves, if this can help them. Because I think everybody wants to be a part of something. And I can see lots of ways where people struggle with belonging in all kinds of different areas of their lives. So what does that process look like exactly? Can you take us like through a little bit of it?
So the first thing I'll say is that you cannot create belonging unless you feel it in your personal life. We'll talk about your audience in a second and why what they're doing is actually a path to belonging. They may not know it. But before that, I always say you need personal belonging before you need professional belonging. And this was a mistake I made in my last company where I essentially, not even just making them drink the Kool-Aid. I took their head and shoved it in the Kool-Aid and like waterboarded them with the Kool-Aid. And I was like, if you don't bleed pink, which was our color, like you don't belong here, and I will hold it against you. And I didn't realize is that different people find belonging in different ways. And the way I break it down is very simple. There are 4 belonging personas. There are eager belongers represented as chimpanzees. There are anxious belongers represented as meerkats. There are reluctant belongers represented as snow leopards. And there are independent belongers represented as wolves. And just those animals usually conjure up the idea of what it is. A chimp is running around having fun with a ton of people, wanting to be included. If they're not included, they feel bad. Anxious belongers seek validation and they still want to be in a group and around people. Reluctant belongers, these snow leopards, are running around looking for a mate and then, basically live a solitary life. And independent belongers can kind of go back and forth. They can either be alone or they can be with other people. So, what comes up for me when I think about the audience of creators and makers who I just have so much respect for because they are doing what they love and sharing it with other people and essentially bucking the trend, if you will, that existed prior to this this birth of the creator movement. And much like they say it's lonely at the top, I imagine it's lonely for creators because they're having usually conversations with themselves. So a community is a wonderful way to kind of hack that. And the first thing I'll say is that what creators usually most likely, they get belonging out of having, they feel belonging through one-sided relationships where it's a one-to-many relationship. So, if you have an audience of 10,000, you're not going to build a relationship with each person, even 1,000. So you have a one-sided relationship and that gives them a sense of belonging. And likewise, by the way, their audience finds belonging through parasocial bonds where they essentially don't know the person, but they feel like they know them. So that's the first thing is kind of like understanding where you find belonging and kind of fitting that into your lifestyle. And that's very important, I think, for makers. And then obviously, when you upgrade and you kind of have the community or you have the masterminds or whatever kind of other adjacent income streams that you may choose, you really need to think about what the community DNA looks like when you build it. And I say that because that word is so trite. It's used so much. It's thrown around. I buy insurance and I'm part of the insurance community. I buy a toaster and I'm part of the toasting community. It's ridiculous. And if you'd like for us to go this route, I'm going to pause in a second. I have some qualifications for how to create communities that are authentic and genuine.
Yeah, I do want to hear about that because I think there's creators out there who are at a stage right now where they feel, okay, people have told me that it's good to have a community, either for leads or for selling access to it or including with their product, but they don't know exactly like what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to serve people. And they don't understand that part about like the DNA, like what is it actually going to do?
Yeah, so I'm going to just, if I look to the left, it's because I'm referencing my book. I don't want to screw this up. So I'm going to talk about two different things. Actually, three different things. The first thing is what I call the qualifier test. Basically, a community, the more qualifiers you have for a community, the better it is. So if I buy home insurance and I'm part of the home insurance community, that's very lame. But if I buy home insurance for an area like that is prone to fires or flooding, that's a little more interesting. If I buy home insurance for areas that are prone to disaster in homes that of families that have most of their life savings in the house, that gets a little more interesting. So the more qualifiers you have for the community, the better it is because the people in it can relate. Even makers, when we go to conference, I'm not a maker. I say when y'all go to conferences, just because you're a maker or a creator doesn't mean you're like homies with everybody, So the qualifier test is very important in order to build a community that feels authentic to its members. Related to that, by the way, is the idea of conscious exclusivity. You can't just get in. You got to have some sort of barriers to entry. And again, there could be different communities, right? It can be just like all the people who purchase this, like, you bought this, so you might want to talk to these other people, whatever. So a really good community has four aspects, and this is based off of research by McMillan and Chavez, and they talk about the four criteria of a great community. The first one is membership, and you need to kind of earn your right to belong. You don't just, not everybody gets membership, it's like a country club that's not racist. The second is influence. And that's where, people in the community can influence the direction of the community because that way they get buy-in. Maybe they communicate to the creator what they want their next course to be. Maybe they communicate to the creator what products they should work on. Maybe they're involved in feedback. Customer advisory boards are a perfect example in larger companies. The next, and by the way, customer advisory boards are usually just ways to appease your largest customers. That's so silly. It should include everybody to really give input on the product. The third is reinforcement. And that's when communities have this kind of positive feedback loop that happens because as you experience these things, this membership, this exclusivity, this influence, whatever, you're more inclined to engage and participate. So there is this kind of reinforcement that's taking place and a flywheel is activated. And finally, the fourth piece is there has to be a shared emotional connection. And that's basically a feeling of belonging. Like I care about you and you care about me. And that's this kind of symbiotic relationship between members, member to member. The third piece I want to just touch on is the type of community that exists. There are many different types of communities. Not just like, there's not just kind of customer community. There are communities of interest, people interested in the same thing around hobbies or pursuits. There are communities of action where people come together to achieve a specific mission. There are communities of practice that goes a little bit beyond interest, where it's like we actually do this thing. We're not just interested in it. There's communities of place that's generally related to geography or mostly geography or some space. And then communities of circumstance, it's like we are all here. Maybe we're all mourning or maybe we're all, whatever. And then I'm in 12-step program. So I'm there in a community. I have an addiction. And I'm there because I'm with other addicts. That's circumstantial. And finally, community of belief. And that's something we share a certain kind of belief or around ideology. So those are the 6 types of communities. A framework that I built on that was developed by Richard Millington. So that's how I think about communities.
Yeah, that's great. I think that all sounds great. What advice would you give to somebody as far as like how to facilitate that in a community that they're building?
Yeah. So
I know I'm sure there's so much you could say there.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, so I think in order to do that, you need to first think of yourself as another member. You're not just the leader. Like, what would you get out of it? 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when you were just pursuing this thing or it was just an idea, what would you have wanted? And the problem is that, so I'll give you a very small example. My hobby is reef keeping. I have several saltwater aquariums, and it's a lot of things to maintain. And when I've joined reef keeping communities, there's people who are like, ask silly questions. There's people who make fun of those people who ask silly questions. There's people who just come in when they need something. I mean, we've all been on these forums where some people have a ton of badges and some people have like 2 posts. So, I think the first thing is like, think about what you would want. And that's the first thing. And forums kind of try to do this. I remember like V-Bulletin back in the day where all these kind of like, they try to do this when it was like all kinds of sub forums and groups. And that's a bit overwhelming. So first thing is think about what you want out of the community. The second thing is define what you are. You can't be everything to everybody. So you you may want to think about communities as products. And I know many of your listeners and customers and users do this, but it has to create value in that somebody would pay for it. I mean, nowadays people are inundated with subscriptions. Why would somebody pay for the community? So there has to be value. And I would say finally, having, one of the things I do, I run a men's group, and one of the things I do is I have a Q4. Every Q4, I do an engagement survey to make sure people feel like they belong. And I measure that on an annual basis. So I think a feeling of belonging is exceptionally important. And that's that kind of shared emotional connection that I talked about. And that can be done in numerous ways. But I think it starts with hospitality, which brings us back to what we talked about early. How do you welcome people? How do you create a warm place? How do you create a culture of reciprocity? How do you enforce your rules? And how do you create your rules and enforce them? Like in my men's community, if you don't show up for an event once we have 3 events per quarter. You don't show up to one of them, we ask you to leave. So how do you enforce your rules to communicate that there's value here and take it seriously? And that all those things are exceptionally important. Those are just some examples. If anybody wants to talk about it, I'm happy to. I'm not a consultant. I don't charge for any of this shit. So if people want to, hit me up, they can. Any social or any email, you'll find me online. But those are some of the things that come to mind. I mean, it's such a big question that requires more thinking for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's excellent. So back to, I guess, entrepreneurs themselves then. I think definitely many feel isolated at some point in their journey. And as somebody who's built and sold a company, what advice would you give to founders who are kind of like struggling with that feeling right now?
I don't think it takes a genius to know that there is an isolation epidemic in this country, specifically impacting men, but we don't have to go there. That's not our topic here. And so I think the first thing is thinking about, understanding that this is part of a larger kind of thing. And the way I think about it is I think about a fuel tank, and I call it the belonging fuel tank. And this tank, unlike other fuel tanks, takes any kind of fuel. It can be ethanol, it can be diesel, it can be unleaded. And each one of these fuels represents a different belonging strategy. And I can tell you that most likely every person has some emptiness in their tank. Some strategy may give you 5%, another 10%, but we all have this kind of emptiness. Maybe 1%, maybe 5%, maybe 25%. And each one of those, that emptiness is an opportunity to create more belonging. So for creators, they're probably doing it because they want to be of service. They want to share their knowledge. They want to share their life pursuit, their product that they spilled, they put blood, sweat, and tears to. So perhaps somebody wants to move into coaching, because they really enjoy the services component of that. Makes them feel like they belong, that one-to-one relationship. Other people may want to go from coaching to community because they want to have a more one-to-many. Other people still want to move to retreats or offsites, where they bring people together in a small group. My new business is essentially boutique retreat centers in urban areas. So, with like 10 rooms. So maybe they want to do that. Maybe they want to go even more, one to thousands, or, one to a ton, not just one to many, and they start doing courses. So if you're feeling lonely, there are a few options. The first option is understand your fuel tank and fill it up either with the examples I gave or things in your personal life that may be missing. The other option, I think, and that would be like kind of complementing your professional routes through your personal routes. The other thing that comes to mind, I just completely forgot, and hopefully it'll come back to me.
I can give
Another idea,
yeah.
by the way, is perhaps a horizontal kind of mind share of other creators in that space. I think a lot of people kind of don't do that. Oh, I remember what it was. So that's another idea, is kind of creating horizontal communities, not just vertical communities for your thing. And then finally, I don't think, I think there's a lot of pride in creating something on your own. I know I certainly have it. My initial idea for a book was supposed to be for, I called it Founding Alone. It was for solo entrepreneurs. And then I realized nobody wants to hear my story. But for me, maybe thinking about how to bring on kind of what I call late co-founders, or and to create founding moments, and just Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, calls it. And how do you, because that's really cool, because you have that product market fit. And then you're just like, and you may want to bring in people who are less, risk of, who are a little more risk averse, and they want to join you in this founding moment. So perhaps bringing on people, and not to be, stingy with equity and all those things. I think it's really important, because going back to like the community aspects, people need skin in the game, they need influence and all those things. So I would think about potentially bringing on partners later on when you feel like you're alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And I feel like I've realized that recently, and seeing some newer entrepreneurs talking about like going through that of like, how do you get over like feeling so alone, or like not having connections to people. And I think some of the things that help, like when you're just starting out, first of all, is when you start getting customers. When you have no customers at all, it's really hard. And so I think this is another reason why, like, we always tell people, you've got to like validate your idea, get it in front of people, try to get somebody there. And like, it doesn't matter if they're paying you less in the beginning or whatever. But once you've got that feedback loop going, that's so motivating. And it goes from like, oh, I guess I'm kind of working on this thing, but then you kind of get off it for a little bit, and you kind of don't know what to do with it. But when you have customers, now the customers are asking for things, and there's problems, and there's things you've got to keep fixing and working on. And that's one part, but then you continue on with that. And if it's just you, yeah, it can still feel lonely. And like for me, another thing that helped is like what you're talking about here, I think, is like having a team. The team's better than only helping you grow the business. It's somebody or multiple people that you're building the business with.
Two things come up for me when you're saying these. So I'm going to say something controversial. Feel free to disagree, and I'm sure many of our listeners today may disagree. I am not sure the title entrepreneur fits somebody who's alone. And to me, a more fitting word is freelancer, or perhaps the solopreneur. But I have a hard time accepting that word. For me, the bar was even higher. Personally, I wasn't an entrepreneur until I sold my business. I'm not a serial, even though I have multiple businesses, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. Now I'll have to have multiple sales to be a serial entrepreneur. And for me, that bar, that high bar motivated me. And I was not comfortable being called an entrepreneur, because even some kid with a lemonade stand is an entrepreneur, and everybody's like, "Oh, I knew I was an entrepreneur when I sold Girl Scouts cookies." So I have a little bit of an issue with that word. Can I share what the other thing, or do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I guess yeah. My thoughts about that would just be, I don't find it so particularly controversial. I guess the thing that bothers me in particular is that like when a solopreneur will like feel like they're doing it as like it's a badge of honor to suffer, but like you can hire other people. Like there's no special award that you're gonna get for like going through that yourself.
It reminds me, like, when
So
people are like, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm so busy. Oh my God."
yeah. So then yeah, what's next that you were gonna say?
The other thing I was going to say is that, your point about, the minimum viable product and like pivoting and all that stuff. Those are classic stuff that you can read by Steve Blank, or you can read, in Eric Ries's Lean Startup. But I will say, kind of the way I think about it is one's ability to separate this, to find the signal from the noise. And I just imagine kind of like, SETI, like the search for extraterrestrial life. They like basically send out radio signals and they like look for like patterns from aliens. It's kind of like that. You're going to find like a dot out of like millions of dots that like are pointless and just noisy. But finding that dot and then drawing a line and being able to move that line and move the needle towards something that actually sticks. And if I was still doing social tables, I mean, listen to this. People ask me about the founding story of social tables. And I say, well, I was going to a wedding. I wanted to see the seating chart. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I saw a digital seating chart with Facebook profiles around the table? Great. And everybody's like, oh, that's an amazing idea, man. Wow. And then I'm like, well, guess what? It didn't make me any money. We were selling it like $49 a pop per event and like made no money. So even though it sounds like interesting and like awesome, we had to move really quickly to realize, actually, wait, we're not B2C, we're business to business, B2B. And then we're like, wait, we're not this like seating chart software. We're actually floor plan software. Oh, we're not just floor plan software, we're sales software, and so on and so forth. So it's that, what you talked about, listening to customers, all that stuff, that's basic, but it's about not what you're saying is basic. It's what everybody gives advice for. That's like 101. 201 is like moving fast, breaking things, and finding the signals through the noise, in my view.
Yeah, that's great. So as you grew that company, Social Tables, to 120 employees, what were some of the like intentional ways that you created culture and belonging in the company, and any like challenges or stories about that of making people feel better included?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is like why I created a company. And that's because I felt alone. Surprise. I was walking I was like, after grad school, I had the crappiest consulting job. I was commuting an hour and a half by public transportation every way. And I got to the office. I was sitting around doing nothing, literally, in a random desk. So I was walking my dog one day about 6 months into this job, and I met this guy named Matt. We ended up starting Social Tables. I ended up parting ways with him 6 months later, but I credit him with pushing me off the cliff. And then I realized, like, that's what I loved. I loved like sitting down with Matt and like, iterating, and I'm like you, I'm like an engineer, so I built it, and I kind of had to, did that. So it started as like a need. I wanted to know, I was going to a wedding. I wanted to know where the cute girls were sitting. So I thought about this idea. Then I met Matt. I had a list of ideas. I was like, how about this one? It was either that or like an app that told you how long to microwave meals for. It was like, that was so anyway, so it started by my desire to have belonging and actually interpersonal relationship with Matt, like just like homies. And then I started building a team, and and that was more fun. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And like for a long time, by the way, I thought about my success as like number of employees, and it's actually not. It's like revenue to ratio to employees. And then I realized we were getting bigger when we were sitting around a table, and we, like a happy hour one day, and we had more than one conversation at that table. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And then I got to 40 employees, and I was like, less fun. And then I got to 100, and I was like, oh shit, this is really, really tough. So I think my sweet spot's 40. Who knows? I might be able to now, like, with more wisdom, do more. But you asked a question about how I created belonging. So I would say, or, a culture of belonging, if you will. So it started with like me and Matt, like just iterating together. I moved to like a team of really awesome people who were passionate about startups and young and all that. And this is like 2011, 2012. So hustle porn wasn't, described as such, and it was like okay to do. And then I realized I was doing a lot of things that actually create belonging because of this need that I had, because I was always alone. And what happened was all my belonging paths, interpersonal relationships, casual encounters with random employees, when you bump into each other, self-esteem and feeling good talking to events and talking to employees, group membership of being a part. These are all belonging paths. Being a part of the hospitality industry and all these associations. All this gave me belonging. And as soon as I sold my company, it was gone. And I was like, wow, I put all my eggs in one basket when it comes to this fundamental need to belong. And then I had to start all over again, which is how I came up with the process I wrote about. Now, how do you create a culture of belonging? Well, I came up with five, what I call the critical path to a culture of belonging. There's 5 steps. The first step, surprise, starts with hospitality. It's making people feel warm, welcome, and accepted. Second part is safety. And that's basically once people are, kick their shoes, kick their feet up and take their shoes off, they feel more safe. And once there's safety, there is engagement, and people kind of start engaging in the company and influencing it and giving, that feedback loop is activated. After that is commitment. When people are engaged, they're committed because they see what they contribute is having an impact. And after they are committed, there's belonging. Each of those can be measured. I think it's on my website. I published it for free. I also give out free chapters. So there's that chapter available for people who want to read it. It's the bonus chapter in the book. But that's how you create a culture of belonging. Each one of these things has things you can do. Everything from like AMA with execs to, like everybody being a receptionist instead of having a receptionist. So those are some of the things you can do to create a culture of belonging that I think is very important. That to me, by the way, Brian, came intuitively. You won't hear me show off too much, but that's something that because I never had it, I really wanted to give it to everybody.
Yeah, that's excellent. So if you could ask everybody to take kind of one small action after this episode to strengthen their own sense of belonging, what would that be?
I knew this question was coming, and I purposely did not think about it. I would say that it would be beneficial to adopt a belonging mindset. And all that means is basically thinking about whatever you're doing and realizing, does this make me feel like I belong? That's it. And I have like a 5-step kind of test. I can read it off real quick. I think it'll be helpful
Sure.
to the listeners if I can find it. I'm looking to the left because I have my book here to cheat because I don't want to misrepresent what I share. But basically, come on. Well, I know what word to look up. Okay. So I call it the 5 C's for evaluating your belonging paths. Again, just to remind the audience, I was asked what to do about belonging, and I said, have a belonging mindset. And what that means is just thinking about things from a belonging perspective, belonging lens. Does this give me belonging? And the way to answer that is very simple. There are 5 C's you can apply. Certainty is the first, like instinctively, intuitively. Do I feel good about this path? Are my college friends am I certain they're like the right people for me right now? Still feels a little toxic-y, whatever. So that's certainty. The second is charged. And that's the question is, does participating in this path gives me energy? If it does not, if it's depleting, draining, may not be the best one. Connected. Is it possible for me to show up genuinely and participate in a way that's authentic to me? Because belonging is all about being seen and accepted for who you are and feeling and experiencing that. Next is celebrated. Do I take pride in participating in it? Do I tell people about it? Like I shared about my men's group, or I talk about social tables. Do I celebrate this path? And then finally, championed. Do I recommend it to other people? Do I endorse it? So those are the 5 things I recommend people think about when having a belonging mindset.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show. Before we get going, where else can people find you online?
Yeah, so my website is danjberger.com, BERGER. And that has some links to the book and some free chapters and a belonging quiz you can take to see what persona you are with free advice on what to do. And then on every social, I'm at Dan Berger, so no J, at DanBerger. And my email is dan@danjberger.com, and I look forward to connecting with whoever wants to.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
I'd like to take a moment to invite you to join our free community of over 5,000 creators at creatorclimb.com. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, check out the Heights Platform YouTube channel every Tuesday at 9 a.m. US Central. To get notified when new episodes release, join our newsletter at thecreatorsadventure.com. Until then, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next episode.